five, I
What are
think.
the chances?
There's,
Let's see.
yeah,
C5,
C5.
perfect. Uh-huh. Perfect.
Okay. Was that all the questions that you had?
And yep, that was it. It's such a special event and stuff. I wanted to, like see who we could share this with, and like
Yes.
like a brotherhood of a museum goers and stuff.
The people who've heard the warnings. You just want to know who else has been warned, I see.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
Sure. Well, it gives people things they can talk about with each other. You can start a nice conversation with someone who's seen what you've seen. Yes, I
Right.
understand. It's very wise
Yeah.
of you.
There's probably a lot of people who haven't heard about all these events
Oh,
and stuff, and they're probably gonna hear about them pretty soon. So yeah, that's true.
eventually.
Yeah,
Eventually.
Yeah.
hear the warnings. Stay for the stories.
All
True.
right. Any other questions on this exhibit before we head to the next one?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, right this way.
Careful,
Which way
everyone.
next? Be careful, don't fall into the grave.
Careful, careful. Stand by the grave. Don't.
Careful. Don't want to have to call Elias back again. Below us here lies the coffin of the final husband of the widow of Shallow Creek. She was called the widow because she had buried 12 husbands, 11 of whom were deceased.
Sounds like a quinoa.
She begged for help from the townspeople, as she said she was being haunted by the vengeful ghost of her most recent husband. The widows of the town tried to help her and formed a group which would sit in her home as the widow tried to get some rest. It was a quick rotation, for you see they all eventually stared straight again into the eyes of the man they used to know. Each night someone sat with her. Before the skies began to lighten, there was a shuffling behind them. One after another, widows fled the still darkened, creaking home. Once that group was exhausted, the widow still pleaded for help. The young single men were sent next, as they were thought to be less prone to fright. It was the same story, however. They all ran for their lives after gazing into the eyes of the dead man once again. The oldest woman in town, felt far too frail, asked, "May I go next?" She sat slumped. She sat slumped forward next to the warm fire in the chair, her eyes closed, her back to the room, when the ghost appeared. His long bony fingers reaching, clawing, slid up over the back of the chair and around the woman's frail, thin neck. From outside the home, a blood-curdling scream that chased the wolves back to their dens was cut short. The townsfolk worried for that poor frail lady, but humoring her, had their ears open in case she called. A number of them reached the steps of the cabin at the same time. They clambered to the front door, flinging it open. Standing tall over two bodies was the frail old woman. You see, what no one realized was that the oldest woman in town was also the wisest. Unable to sleep well in the cold nights due to her old bones, she slept during the warm daylight hours. Every night she watched the dead husband of the widow of Shallow Creek creep into house after house throughout the town. For you see, as people to sit with the terrified widow, her very much alive husband was looting their houses and then returning later to show his wife what he had stolen while the townspeople were trying to help. The oldest woman, however, went prepared, rolling pin in her sleeve, to expose the ruse of the widow of Shallow Creek.
You okay?
I've got a.
You having like a flashbacks?
Who?
What? You? Yeah, you said the oldest woman, and then it sounded like you were having like a trouble. You having like a flashbacks? You thinking about oldness?
It's hard for me to pretend to be old, so it takes time to get into character and everything. It really takes the wind out of you to try to pretend, you know? It's not easy.
Yeah, that's true. I could never pretend.
uh-oh.
It's difficult. Yeah.
Just making
You
sure.
said that she had 12 husbands and buried. Buried 12 husbands, 11 of them deceased.
Yeah, she buried 12 husbands, 11 of whom were deceased. You see that
Right.
final husband? He never actually got buried. They just pretended that was the ruse. He never actually. Yeah. Now you're
I
thinking.
thought they buried him alive. Sorry.
No. He was never dead to begin with. That was part of the ruse. They tricked the whole town.
But if you're ever buried alive, always have like an emergency bell in the coffin so you can ring it.
Make sure you're buried with a bell. Yeah, you can. That way you can be heard underground.
No, can you make bells?
No.
Yeah. I'll find a bell.
There's one right there on the post.
No, you can't have that bell. It's part of the display.
I'll use one of the big ones, like the ship ones.
Sure, you can take that with you. You have to have a larger.
You'd be buried with that whole thing? What the balls?
I mean, yeah.
Surface area to cover.
Yeah, you're gonna be in a huge box. Like what? Like a
Well, I
mausoleum,
mean, if I'm not dead, that would be quite a luxury.
Can you be buried in the bell? Just stuffed in the bell and buried. Maybe.
There you go. That's efficiency, that is.
Yeah, didn't we have cousins that were in the stuffing business?
No, we didn't. We had cousins who were in the ice cream sales business.
Oh yeah, those fruit cakes.
What the?
I don't think you can use that word.
And some sort of ice cream sales.